As a man, Bobby was just an incredible human being. I don't know anyone other than Jesus Christ that didn't have an enemy. And Bobby was loved and adored by so many people.
Anybody that's been around the NBA knows that players frequently have their buddies and even maybe players that don't like them. Bobby Fields was one of those 100%ers. I cannot think of an enemy.
This guy was as genuine a player as you could find, and as genuine a person as you could find.
Well, I think that Bobby Fields was one of our really outstanding citizens in the town. He's the one guy that the organization could go to for anything when it came to helping the needy, giving out food. He was always there for us.
Bobby was one of the world's most goofiest dads. He would hide that part, but a lot of people didn't know that he wanted to be a doctor and not an NBA player. And so to see him achieve his dreams and aspirations and just put in the work ethics to become a professional athlete, I emulated him. He made me a better person.
Steve out. Backdoor.
He's a solid player. He's a player you want. There's not a team in the NBA that would not have wanted him in the roster. Just a guy that made you better.
He always had a fire about him. He had a respect for his teammates.
His style of play, everybody knew he played hard, hustled, scrappy, got the loose balls, and competed at a very high level.
He would be on the second team, and he would be yelling at the first team like, "Hey, we're beating you. You know, you guys are supposed to be the starters." And he had this competitive juice about him.
He was one of our leaders. Bobby was defensively, he was an anchor. He was the guy that went out there and we put on the best players on each team.
Moment rest and back in. Here's Morning. Shot rejected by Bobby Fields. A rubber wall block.
Yeah, I never enjoyed playing against Bobby Fields. He would post me up because I was too small. You know, he would just torture me on the box. But great guy, enjoyed playing against him. You know, just a tremendous man.
I remember one game, we were down by like 1 point and didn't have a lot of time, but he hadn't played, but he came in and I told him, I said, look, I'm gonna give you the ball, and if you get it, you gotta score, man, okay?
6 seconds, 5 seconds. Bill throws up a wild shot. Yes! He hit it! He hit the deck, and he was fouled! Oh my goodness!
We kind of came into the league the same. We both played in the CBA. We both played, worked our way to get into this league. We both signed our deals the same year with Charlotte. And there was a closeness there that, you know, it just happens. Sometimes you just find a vibe with somebody. And so playing with him was fun, and we had great chemistry on the court, but I thought, you know, some of the best times we had were just playing one-on-one, scratching and clawing, no fouls called, and trying to beat each other up and then walk off and go grab some lunch.
We were at shoot around at the Charlotte Coliseum. We were going to play the Bulls that night. I was making ice bags at the ice machine. The ice machine was at the rear exit of the locker room. Bobby usually went out the rear exit. I asked him where he was off to, you know, and he said he was going to go to get breakfast with David Wesley. A few minutes later, the trainer gets a phone call from David.
A friend of mine called. He said, man, he said, there's a bunch of people who play for the Hornets and they're just standing there. And there's a car that's smashed up. Every piece of news coming out of there was bad. And
I had given thought to going to that shoot-around that day and chose not to. And I'm just at home and I had it on local news and they're flying in live remotes and you're just kind of, I remember I was just blown away.
Just before 11 o'clock this morning, 30-year-old Bobby Ray Fills died in a 3-car collision about the 1500 block of West Hivola Road. Initial indications are that Mr. Fills was traveling at a very high rate of speed. His 1997 Porsche went out of control, crossed into the westbound lanes, and was struck in the driver's door area by another vehicle. A 4th car, driven by Mr. David Wesley, also a member of the Charlotte Hornets, was in close proximity to the collision and has been identified by a witness also as being driven at a high rate of speed at the time.
Telephone rings, my office, and it's probably about 10 past 12, and it's Gil McGregor. And he's been at practice. He rode by the accident. He called me, and for 15 minutes, after he told me what had happened, the two of us couldn't say a word.
I saw him driving out the Coliseum. As a rookie, I was following behind in my slow-ass Lexus, and when I turned the corner, you know, I was like, saw David Wesley like this, and I saw Bobby's car in the middle of the highway. And I just parked my car and walked over to his car.
And it was no doubt a shock to all of us. Here's a young man who just signed a new contract and was a great human being, and he was gone.
It's the only day in my journalism career that I said, you know what, guys, I probably need to write a column today, and I don't feel up to it. It was tough.
It is very basic to journalism that you do not, you're not supposed to become emotionally attached to the people that you cover. Bobby was a terrific person. He was the father of young kids. It was so shocking to hear that. It was so sad to hear that I just started weeping uncontrollably in my car. I mean, it just seemed like such a horrible thing that totally transcended anything about sports.
It was sad. It was super sad because I knew, you know, it was just like he had kids and his wife, and, you know, he just meant so much to the community and the people here. And most importantly, like, he was the glue for our team, you know? He was the glue.
I don't think you could get any one of my teammates to touch a basketball probably for at least 3 days, it seemed like. I remember that we were scheduled to play the Chicago Bulls at home the day that happened.
And of course, they canceled the game that night. And the funeral was 2 days later. The Knicks stayed in town. And to a man, every man on the Knicks roster was at that funeral.
Wow, I remember looking up and seeing the entire team at his homegoing service, and it kind of reminded me, gee, I must have been the luckiest woman in the world, because it showed me how much they respected and admired Bobby. And it meant a lot to me and my family.
There he is, heaven, with the angels.
We remembered Bobby Fills at every game we had after his passing. And that kind of signaled you want a story, every story has to have an ending. This is a story that didn't have one. And it needed it. Charlotte needed to put it in proper perspective. The team needed to put it in proper perspective. And the best way to do it was to retire his jersey.
It was an honor. You look in other arenas across the NBA, and you see all these great players that have played for the organization, and you look up in the rafters and you see their number. And when George Shinn told me that they were going to retire his number, it was just so emotional.
I remember that night. I think that it was a player who was had a lot of abilities. He was a humble man in that year he volunteered to come off the bench as opposed to being a starter because it would help the team. And that was the kind of person he was. And that's what you're thinking about during a retirement ceremony like that. And we did it because he was a valuable part to that team and to the organization.
I think there probably was some closure for some of the fans who never got to say bye. And I think it's amazing the short time he was here, how many lives he affected.
And I just remember how more than any other moment you saw that this was not just a basketball player. And there's no gesture, but I mean, he was much more than a basketball player. He was a husband, and he was a father. And I just remember it being just incredibly sad.
I'll never forget Paul's press conference that night to the New York media. He said, "Something very bad has happened, but life has to go on. We're going to play this game tonight and play it like Bobby would want us to do it."
And I think for him, it was about continuing to keep us together, right? To do things as a team. You know, we didn't run from it. We addressed it. You know, we spoke his name in the locker room, all kind of things, just to let, you know, just to ease the pain.
I think all of those guys really pulled together. You know, I would be willing to bet you those guys can go years from now and they'll still think back to how close that team was. There was a camaraderie within that team that I don't know you frequently see, and it showed how much they cared about Bobby and each other. And there was a sense that they, I can't tell you how many times you heard they'd lose a game. And Anthony Mason specifically, but others would say it as well, Bobby would be disappointed in this effort. We need to think what Bobby would do.
I mean, it just made us closer as a team. We spent more time grieving together, right? And celebrating Bobby and talking about him. And, you know, Bobby never left us. He still, you know, for me, he ain't left me yet, you know? And so I think that's the thing that kind of brought our team together and made us closer.
I cannot put into the words the love and support that the Charlotte Hornets organization showed my family and I. I ended up starting a foundation to continue Bobby's legacy, and they just, you know, wrapped their arms around me, and whatever I wanted to do, they supported me. Still today, when people recognize my last name, they remembered. And they were like, "I prayed for you when that happened. You know, I can't believe, you know, your kids were only 1 and 3 and now they're almost grown." So it's been almost 18 years and the love still keeps pouring in, which is why I haven't left Charlotte.
He was a Louisiana native, so it did have some meaning to people in New Orleans. But they understood what Bobby Phills meant to this franchise. And I think when you take a look at the swapping of the franchise names and stuff like that, both teams, both franchises were very cognizant of all of that.
Because the jersey didn't return immediately. And so I would ask my brother-in-law, "Steven, what are they gonna do with Bobby's jersey?" I had to know, even if it came back to my house. I wanted to know what would happen.
One of the things that was very important to us as an organization when we went to the NBA to ask whether we could potentially bring the Hornets name back, we also wanted to bring back the history of NBA basketball in Charlotte from 1988 to 2002 when the Hornets left to move to New Orleans. As part of our history, we wanted to bring back the only jersey that had been retired in Hornets history and hang it in the rafters where it should rightfully be in this city.
When I heard the news that it was coming back, it was just a moment where I was like, yes, yes. I was so excited, so excited.
It brought a sense of stability that the team came back, and I think that to put Bobby Phil's name back in the rafters, I think helped bring back the stability.
Just the love and support that the fans showed that night was overwhelming. To see his jersey out in the stands and to know that even after 18 and a half years, they still remembered Bobby. And that was just an incredible feeling and just an amazing, memorable night for my family and I.
Bobby, in many ways, created his own legacy. I mean, you could see that just from the impact he had on his teammates and the coaching staff and the organization, the city, but also his own family. You could see that through Kendall, through his kids.
It was neat to see his children go to school here and thrive on the athletic field and in the classroom as he did. I think that was an important step, and I think a lot of people, it brings a smile on people's faces to see that happen.
Today I still get the stories. I still get the stories that kind of touch my heart, and I even tear up like, well, yep, that was Bobby. It doesn't surprise me.
And somebody told me this, well, not Phil's, but I was at a store here before Halloween, and a kid asked his mom if she'd buy him this Halloween costume. The mom said, I can't afford it. Phil's quietly picked it up and handed it. Didn't want to embarrass the mom in front of the kid. Handed it to mom and said, I got it. And I think that's the kind of guy Phil's was.
He just had a way of making people all feel part of it. It didn't matter what your job was. He was all about the team. He was all about making Charlotte Hornets a championship team.
Bobby Fields' legacy. Bobby was a humble guy, a fierce competitor. He was a devoted husband. He was a wonderful son, brother, friend. He was a community leader. He was admired by so many people. And his legacy doesn't stop. His legacy will live on through his children. His legacy will continue through his grandchildren with the spirit of excellence. So it will live on.